With the launch of the new PlayStation and Xbox on the horizon, the first question on everyone's mind is, what the hell was Microsoft thinking when naming this thing? I mean, really? Xbox Series X? What is this, a porno? The next question is probably, what will the launch games be? After all, what use is a video game console if you don't have any video games to play on it? If you're Nintendo, the answer is pretty simple. All you have to do is take a console and slap an Italian plumber on it. Instant success. In fact, it works so well that every Nintendo console, except for the Wii, 3DS and Switch, has had some form of Mario game on release. Although I never quite understood why they used green Mario for the GameCube. Perhaps the most important of these launches was back in 1996 with the N64. This was Nintendo's chance to prove that 3D gaming was the next big step in entertainment, and the game to showcase this had to be perfect. Well, it wasn't. I mean, it was close, but it wasn't perfect, not even back then. It was pretty damn revolutionary though. But I'm not here to tell you how revolutionary it was within the public conscience on release. If you're interested in that kind of video, there's a whole slew of them on this very site. In fact, there's just a lot of videos on Super Mario 64 in general. Pretty much everything has been said about this game at this point, so what I'm going to talk about is my experiences with the game after having replayed it almost 24 years after its initial release. So, let's get started.
It's me, Mario! Hello!
It's pretty obvious that Super Mario 64 is supposed to be a technical showcase from the moment you start up the game. The now infamous model of Mario's head that pops up to greet you has more tries than his entire in-game model, and almost as many tries as his Sunshine model. Well, the Super Mario Sunshine model isn't much to write home about, true, but still the amount of detail here truly highlights how this would never have been possible until now. After you choose a save file, you're greeted by a small cutscene where Mario is promised some cake by Princess Peach. It's a nice little touch that the letter is read aloud by a voice actress, but I swear to God, this flyby scene is the bane of my existence. I do have to say though, I really like the introduction of Mario here. Thankfully, after this short box of text that no one takes any time to read through anyways, you're left on your own? For being the pioneer of the 3D platforming genre, Super Mario 64 sure doesn't hold your hand a lot. All they tell you is that you use the control stick to move around, the A button to jump, and the B button to attack. Oh, and that you can read signs. Other than that and the short camera tutorial you get the moment you set foot on the bridge leading to the castle, there really isn't any more info given to you unless you seek it out yourself by, for example, reading said signs. Mario has a pretty big repertoire of moves at his disposal, including the long jump, the backflip, the side flip, and the dive, to name a few. The thing is that to complete the game, you don't need any of these, like, at all. The only move that's really pushed by the game is the long jump, since you'll come across these wide chasms pretty often in the later stages. However, realistically, all you need is the jump and the punch. Keep in mind though that when I say complete the game, I mean get 70 stars and defeat Bowser. To get the last 50, you'll more than likely need to employ some of the more advanced moves. These moves, the long jump, side flip, and so on, are not only what makes the game so fun to play, but also what completely blows it wide open. Sometimes it doesn't feel like the challenges here were designed with the entirety of Mario's moveset in mind. In some areas, what's supposed to be a tricky movement-based challenge can easily be subverted by a couple of easy jumps. Take Tick-Tock Clock for example. This level is infamous for how challenging it can be, and that's fair, it is the second to last normal course after all. One would expect the difficulty to be ramped up here. In this level, you climb up what's supposed to be the inside of a giant clock, with moving parts and all. Like the wall toad outside tells you, the speed and behavior of the level depends on what the hour hand is on when you jump in. Entering when it's near the number 3 will see everything move at regular speeds, I suppose. At 6, the speed is erratic and stuff might change course midway. At 9, the speed simply increases compared to 3, and at 12... Well, it's a reason that the 8 red coin star that tells you to stop time is the last one you'll get to. While it is possible to get all the coins when the clock is running, it's much easier when it's frozen. It's just a shame that this is also true for every other star except for the one where you need to ride this clock hand to safely get over to where it is. I mean, there's probably a way to jump down from above and get it, but for this example, I'm gonna stress the word safely. There's nothing really stopping you from climbing all the way to the top of the clock while it's not running, thus negating the danger that all the obstacles and tiny platforms bring while moving. The only thing you need is to successfully execute one side flip to wall kick, and there you go. By the way, the side flip is ridiculously lenient when it comes to how long you have to execute it after turning. You can literally start the jump, then turn back in the direction of where you were originally running towards and still get it. When you're able to pull off jumps like these, what's gonna stop you? These pistons that are sticking just far enough out from the wall that they allow you to walk past? Ha! Please! The only part where some might have a little trouble with is getting up to the platform where the thwomp is, since you need to be kinda accurate with a triple jump to wall kick, but realistically you have an unlimited amount of tries here since you're no way in any danger should you fail. There are plenty of other examples throughout the game, but I found this one to be the most interesting since it basically encompasses an entire level. On the other hand, you can argue that they designed it to be like this, where the most skilled players would be rewarded by having the upper half be a little more relaxing, but judging by how the layout is with the elevators and spinning clock hands, I really doubt that. That's not to say that I think the levels are badly designed, far from it. I think that all the courses are mostly fun to play through, not you, and bring something new to the table in terms of gameplay and visual identity. I also like how some of these stages has this little narrative going on in the background, which subtly changes the course based on what you do within it. I hate to bring it up since it's been done to death, but it is the first time it happens. So, in Bob-Bomb's battlefield, when you first arrive, the pink bombs are waging war against the evil black one. Oh god, that sounds really racist. The Bob-Bomb buddies are waging a war against the evil regular Bob-Bombs, led by their king, King Bob-Bomb. And thus, they need to use their cannons. When you make your way up to face off with the king, there are 2 cannonballs rolling around near the entrance to the hill. After defeating King Bob-Bomb and choosing the next mission, one of the buddy-oms will exclaim that the king is now just a dud and prepare the cannons for your personal use. When you then raise Koopa the Quick up the mountain, there are now suddenly 3 cannonballs at the mountain foot. One of them presumably the king himself. By the way, I was dead sure this guy outs you for cheating if you use the teleport. I even made it a point to do it right in front of him, but for some reason I couldn't get that reaction unless I used the cannons. Anyways, stuff like this makes the levels feel alive, and Bob-Bomb Battlefield isn't the only example of this. It was when I played Jolly Roger Bay that I truly started to notice these small things, like how during the first star you're supposed to dive down and notice the eel lodged in the ship. You can spend your entire day trying to lure him out, but what you actually need to do is to just leave. The ship is far enough down in the water that when you reach it, you'll already be kinda low on air, so after having an intense stare-off with the bastard, you're left with the choice of either dying from drowning or leaving to find air. The most likely source of oxygen is straight up, back to the surface where you came from, and when you dive back down, the eel is inexplicably swimming around outside the ship. Sweet! Once you race the ship, it appears on the surface and the eel no longer has its original home, so it finds a new one. Small details like this makes it feel like this is something more than just a world that exists for Mario to explore. It's a shame that these background stories are almost non-existent the further you get into the game though. But these small details and implied scenarios is also something that I'm discovering for the first time during this playthrough. You see, I've never really thought that critically about Super Mario 64 while playing it until now. After having played through this game in its entirety, God knows how many times, I've started to just go into autopilot. I don't think about the stuff I do anymore. I went in this time with the intent to actually focus on what I was doing, but I still caught myself slipping into a trance here and there. When I played SM64 for the first time, I was barely 5 years old. Actually, the memory of when I got my very own N64 console is probably one of my earliest and best memories ever. I was at the birthday party of one of our neighbors, and he'd gotten a brand new Nintendo 64 as a gift from his parents. I was awestruck. I really wanted to try it, but I was too afraid to ask with all the other kids around. I don't remember, but I probably pestered my parents about this, or at least talked a lot about it. One evening after I was done with my homework, my parents kept suggesting I go to bed early for some reason. I was like, what? No, why should I do that? I'm allowed to stay up until 8. They finally made me at least go into my bedroom, and there, right under the blanket on the bed, was a big, square-shaped thing. I ripped the covers off, and lo and behold, a brand new Nintendo 64 console with Super Mario 64 packed in. What stands out the most to me is that this was just any other normal weekday. I hadn't been especially good, it wasn't even my birthday, yet my parents went out to buy me a console I really wanted, just to make me happy. We weren't ever poor, but we'd just moved into a newly built house, so I imagine that money must have been tight. For them to just go out and buy this for my sake, despite having to probably sacrifice some comfort for themselves, isn't something I'd truly appreciate until a few years later. But goddamn if it's not one of my favorite memories regardless. So, yeah, like I said, I've been playing this game for a long time. Going into the game with the intent to observe and analyze the world around me led to a lot of small discoveries, like for example how you can hold the R trigger while modifying Mario's face to have the changes stay in place. I absolutely laughed my ass off after having created this monstrosity. It also made me realize that my preconceptions about the game were flawed. Super Mario 64 is not a collectathon. Like, first of all, a ton is a unit of measurement that measures weight. I can't remember having collected a ton of anything in this game. So here's my question. If Super Mario 64 is a collectathon, then where the hell are all the... Okay, so I kinda had to say that to make the joke work, but the truth is, I don't think it was meant to be a collectathon. You see, I started thinking, this game is pretty much the basis for most of the 3D Mario titles that came after it. A core concept that Sunshine refined and that the Galaxy games perfected. But what is it? Well, let's talk about the levels. When you start the game, only Bob-omb Battlefield is open to you. The first star involves getting to the top of that mountain, and there's really only one path you can take to get there. On the way there, you'll run past this chain chomp guarding a star. Now, you might not be confident enough in your abilities to try and get this, or you might think that this is the star you're supposed to find. Either way, the game is essentially saying that you don't have to go for the star you chose, and can instead explore the level to maybe find something else. Anyways, after defeating the king, which is just a tease of what's to come when fighting Bowser, your next challenge to reach the peak, but fast this time. Well, I wouldn't say that it's much of a challenge, but there is a time limit. The combination of these two missions give you a pretty good understanding of the level. They both take you on a round trip throughout the whole thing. This is done throughout almost all the levels with the first, second, and sometimes third star. The reason for this is that after the first few missions, you're basically left to your own devices, and the hints that appear on the star select screen become more vague. Like, for example, in Tall Mountain. I'd say Scale the Mountain is a bit more easy to understand first star than Mysterious Mountainside or Breathtaking View from Bridge, right? The game is purposefully leading you through the entire level and dropping these small nudges along the way. I mean, that's still not a good enough reason to have you climb the mountain 2 times in a row, but hey. I'm pretty sure this is part of why the boot out mechanic exists. First of all, Nintendo must have been apprehensive about new players navigating in a 3D environment, right? After all, this was amongst the first of its kind. I believe they tried to ingrain the layout of the levels in the minds of players by having them completely run through them at least twice before giving them challenges that were maybe more difficult to figure out. It does make sense. I don't know if it's because I've played Super Mario 64 so many times, but I can pretty much run through the entire game in my head if I want to, and I can't say that about a lot of other games. Secondly, and this kinda goes into the first point as well, it's much easier to tailor an experience to the player if you have a default starting position. I mentioned it briefly already, but I really like how they drop hints here and there to point players towards other stars than the one you're currently pursuing. In Cool Mountain, you're told to head into the pipe of the cottage you start next to. After you've finished the slide, you're not given the star until you go outside, which gives you a chance to talk to the penguin mom who's missing her baby. The next star hints towards bringing that baby to her, so you'll obviously grab the first one you see, which is the one on the top next to where you start off, and bring it to her. Another example I really like lies within Big Boo's haunt. During the first star, you need to hunt down all the boos in the mansion, but the developers intentionally made some of the platforms abnormally easy to fall off of. This one bridge that gives away when you step on it comes to mind. And what first seemed like a bottomless hole is actually a pitfall that leads into the underground merry-go-round, which is the subject of the very next star. Super Mario 64 is a very mission-based game, even though it might not seem like it at first. I understand why people feel like this though, after all, it actively pushes the player into jumping between worlds, even though they haven't fully completed them yet. A big driving factor with this lies in the colored caps that are found here and there. They need to be unlocked before you can use them via these special levels that are found throughout the game. The wing cap, which allows you to fly, is found by looking up at the ceiling in the castle lobby after collecting 12 stars. Just imagine experiencing this for the first time. You're just walking around and all of a sudden there's light coming in from the roof. You look up and bam, you're in a secret level. Talk about throwing you into the deep end. The flight controls are pretty heavy, to be honest, and while I've gotten kinda good at them over the years, I always manage to fail at collecting these red coins once or twice, since if you actually follow the trail of coins down in a circle, you'll build up quite a lot of speed near the end, and flying really doesn't seem like it was made for pinpoint accuracy at all. It works fine enough in the big open levels you usually get the wing cap in, and it's a blast every time, except for when you have to collect stuff. The metal cap entrance is actually found inside another level and is interestingly enough just a hidden cave behind the waterfall in the castle grounds. This cap turns Mario metal, which makes him invulnerable and also able to walk underwater. The vanish cap makes Mario disappear, I guess, even though you can clearly see him. Mechanically, it makes you invulnerable and able to go through certain walls, but that's about it. The thing about these caps is that between all three of them, they're only really needed 6 times throughout the game. You need the Vanish cap in Big Boo's haunt to enter the room with Mr. I for the 6th star. You need the Metal cap in Hazy Maze Cave to activate the switch underwater. You need a combination of the Vanish and Metal caps to get to this cage at the bottom of the lake in Dire Docks. You need the Vanish cap to gain access to this cage in Wet Dry World, and then the Vanish cap again in Snowman's Land to get the star inside the igloo. There's a couple of examples where the caps are available, but not necessarily required. Like in Jolly Roger Bay, if you're really good at swimming, you can just overpower this jet stream instead of using the metal cap. You might not even realize that there's a wing cap in Lethal Lava Land, but it does make it easier to navigate. You don't need the metal cap in the Poison Fog Maze in Hazy Maze Cave since, for one, it's pretty short, and there are also plenty of coins to refill your health. This one's a bit of a stretch, but it is 100% possible to shoot yourself through all 5 coin rings in Bob-omb Battlefield and get the star that way. In a way, Super Mario 64 plays a lot like a 2D Mario game of old. Power-ups are there mainly to make things easier, and there's an implied order of things. Almost like going from level to level. The difference is, of course, that you can completely ignore the hints and just go do your own thing. Although I am the kind of player that prefers to clean out an entire level one by one, I can't say I don't like design like this. Some of my favorite stages are still the Bowser ones though. These are linear and definitely 2D Mario based. The last one in particular is super fun to run through. I don't really have a big issue with the Bowser fights themselves, to be honest. The first one is a nice introduction, the second one, where he almost flips the stage, took me for quite a ride the first time it happened, and the last one feels appropriately last boss-like. Though to even get to that point, you need to collect 70 stars. Well, technically I guess you could get in there with only 50 if you abuse the long jump up the endless stairs, but I always go for a 100% run anyways, so I don't really use that glitch. When you get to the basement and the 2nd and 3rd floor, they kinda throw the star requirement thing out the window, and you gain access to a bunch of levels at the same time. These levels are usually close to each other in terms of difficulty, and by making a lot of levels available at the same time, you can kinda just jump between them if you get stuck at a difficult star. Like I said, you need 70 stars to access the final level, and this is just a little under 2/3 of the total of 120 stars. So you do have a lot of freedom when it comes to collecting them. I suppose that's a good thing. Upping the challenge in Super Mario 64 often just means that the platforms get smaller, or the walkways get narrower. This wouldn't be a problem if the direct cause of the increase in difficulty wasn't because of the controls or camera working against you. It takes a little while for Mario to gain momentum, so having super tiny platforms like in the top of the volcano in Lethal Lava Land, where you can't pick up any speed before you jump, could easily lead to failure. When it comes to the camera, a lot of the narrow walkways are just really easy to deal with once you actually stop and zoom in with the camera to place it behind you. But this setup is so twitchy that you can only really run straight forward unless you want to be disoriented. The core of the problem is that a lot of the challenges in Super Mario 64 is actually just a test of patience, which is kinda weird since everything else you do is built on quick traversal. Another part of the challenges I hear talked about a lot is the 100 coin stars, especially in the levels that don't have that many coins. I've always felt that you're supposed to do these last, although when you collect them you're not booted out of the level for some reason, so doing it in tandem with another star is kind of viable. Let's take Shifting Sandland for example. You absolutely need to enter the pyramid in order to collect 100 coins, but once you enter you can't leave. The 100 coin stars serve as the ultimate challenge of how well you know the level, so of course if you don't know that and enter the pyramid first, then you have failed. It's the same with the volcano in Lethal Lava Land and how it can be really hard to backtrack in, for example, Tick-Tock Clock, Rainbow Ride, or Hazy Maze Cave. They all test your knowledge of the course at a very minute detail. They're kind of the evolved 8 red coin or 5 hidden secret star that a lot of levels has. Speaking of hidden secrets, there's also a bunch of stars hidden outside of the normal levels. A lot of these are found in the special cap rooms and in the Bowser levels as 8 red coin challenges, one in each. There are 3 stars that you get by just talking to some random wall toads. You can literally go the entire game without noticing these guys since they're only really visible once you get near them. Then there's the 2 you get from the rabbit in the basement. This guy can be a pain to catch actually, and he's definitely a reference to the rabbit in Alice in Wonderland. Japan really has a hard-on for that series for some reason. Then there's the ones that have their own level, of which there are only 4, and 2 of them are in the same level. You know what, these aren't even that special. Sure, it's kinda cool to be swimming inside a giant aquarium, but this flying one is just kinda bland, and if you fall, you end up all the way back in the castle grounds and have to climb back up to the 3rd floor for another try. Actually, now that I think about it, all of the areas you get these stars in, except for the Bowser and Slide ones, are directly connected to the castle, in the sense that if you fall or exit from a certain place, you'll always end up in the castle or the castle grounds. Neat. The last 2 ones you get by completing a slide. One for completing it normally and one for doing it fast. One of my friends told me that there was a hidden 3rd star that appeared on the top of this brick frame if you managed to get all the way back up after reaching the bottom. It was totally just some made up bullshit, but I asked him something along the lines of, "Wow, is it like half blue and half yellow?" And he was like, yeah, sure. And I totally believed him. That's something I love about this game. It's so mysterious. Back in the day when the internet wasn't as readily available as it is today, playground rumors like this circulated all the time. And I mean, is it any less believable that there's a 3rd star in the Princess's Secret Slide than that there's a dinosaur living on the roof of the castle? This blew my mind back in the day, and probably ruined my expectations for what to expect from 100% completing a game for years. I mean, you get 100 lives, and when you triple jump, you sparkle. How cool is that? Looking back at it, it wasn't really cool at all, to be honest. Thankfully, the game itself is still about as cool as it was back then, maybe even cooler. And I'm glad that I can honestly say that I'm having a blast every time I replay it, even to 100%. There's just something about this game that I have trouble putting into words, and it's not just nostalgia. Super Mario 64 is one of those games that I can keep coming back to again and again, and not a lot of Mario games have that kind of appeal to me. The only ones I feel the same about in that regard are probably the two Galaxy games. I'm really glad I decided to take a look at the game through a more critical lens though. I was actually sort of worried I'd come to like it less because of it, but if anything, I like it more now than I ever have before. That makes me curious of what I'd make of Super Mario Sunshine if I did the same with that game. Hey, you know what? I deserve a vacation, don't I?